Thanks, Steve. Well, welcome. I am Tom Munson here at the Sioux City Public Museum, and that walking tour of Summit Street coming up July, I'm not going to wait till the end because I'll certainly forget, is July 9th at 7 o'clock. You'll notice some new things going on today. We have a new microphone. You may know that I never go mic'd. However, I am suffering from allergies right now, and I would not have been able to make it through without. So, we're actually going to take quite a while to get to our first slide because I need to set the context for Charles N. Taylor. Taylor is different among photographers in this era, 1890 to 1893. He is here in Sioux City for only these 3 years. He came to Sioux City during our boom era. This is an era from 1880 when Sioux City was a city of 7,500 people. By 1885, that population had tripled to some 20,000. And by 1890 to 40,000. Sioux City is a very fast-growing Western American city. Now, there are lots of things that are leading this. Mostly it's the agricultural boom and the filling of the West with people. There are people moving here. There are people farming. Railroads are coming. Manufacturing and agricultural processing is concentrating here in Sioux City. So again, there are about 40,000 people in Sioux City in 1890. By 1893, I have read figures that there may have been as many as 62,000 people living here. Can you imagine an era where over 3 years we've tripled in population, then doubled, and then possibly even doubled again in population to around 60,000? So this is what we define as Sioux City's boom era, really from 1886 to 1893. One thing that is also unique about Taylor is that he is taking photographs of street scenes, of buildings, of homes, of house interiors. This is an era when most photographers are taking portraits. If we look at most photos from the 1890s here in Sioux City, while the other photographers are quite accomplished, they're mostly taking portraits. So that's one thing that's kind of unique about this collection. A little bit about the history of the museum and this particular photography collection. Back in the 1970s, numerous glass plate negatives were found in attic insulation in Winner, South Dakota. They were identified as having been taken here in Sioux City. So the glass plate negatives were brought here. The Museum and Historical Association paid for prints to be made off of these negatives. There was simply a loan. So what we have here at the museum are about 224 prints off of glass plate negatives, and that's what this collection is. It's a miracle that they were found in some attic and then identified as being here. A little bit about Taylor himself. Well, the fact is we know almost nothing about Charles N. Taylor, other than on a couple of his photographs, his name appears, and the only other evidence that suggests that he exists are his listings in the Sioux City directories in 1891, 1892, and 1893. So I think I've set the context for this. So let's take a look at what Taylor was doing and what he was capturing. We are being recorded today, just so you're aware. If you have any questions, maybe hold off until the end, or if it's really necessary, I suppose you can ask me during the middle. But I'll try to address those questions as they come up. So, Charles N. Taylor photography, 1890 to 1893. This is an advertisement of Charles N. Taylor in the 1892-1893 Polk City Directory. You can see it right here. Photographic views, Charles N. Taylor. He's not advertising portraiture. He's talking about groups, residences, trotting horses, etc. Trotting horses, that's interesting because as we look at photography and motion, this is an era with long exposure times, so you get a lot of blurring in moving images. He also had a magnificent set of Black Hills views. We do not have any of those. His office, as you can see, was at 101.5 4th Street. So that's basically the corner of 4th and Pearl. This is an image of Pierce Street looking north from 4th. What's going on? Sioux City is a modern city. What we see in this are 2 streetcars. That's not so out of the ordinary, but what is out of the ordinary is the fact that they're electrified. Sioux City streetcars had recently been electrified at this point. It was only in April of 1890 that had taken place. We see in the background the Hotel Bogue, the Hills and Taylor block, the Richardson block, the Hotel Garretson. Here on the left side is the Pierce block and the Iowa Bank building. The streets, take a look at the streets. They kind of look like they're dirt. They're really not. They're cedar block paving covered with tar. Taken from about the same spot, this is an image of 4th Street looking east from Pierce. We see there on the left, that is still the Hotel Bogue, and down the block we have the Martin building, the Wise block, and the Metropolitan block there on the far right. Dirt streets again, we'd see granite curbstones, and we do have granite sidewalks, and take a look there on the far right side of that image. There's a little wooden ramp from the sidewalk down to the street. Again, this is Sioux City's boom era. And his portrait and his photographs indicate just when he was here, so we know for sure he was here by October of 1890 for the 1890 Corn Palace Festival. Of course, this is our 3rd Corn Palace. 3rd? No, this is our 4th Corn Palace Festival in October of 1890. This palace was located at the northeast corner of 6th and Pierce, where the Davidson building now stands. One of Taylor's great photos is this image of the Corn Palace Parade. We're standing in the Massachusetts block, which is under construction in this photograph. You can see the parade there on 4th Street. From left to right, you can see the Metropolitan block, the Peavey Grand Opera House, the Chicago Hotel. You can see in the background the Lexington block under construction. And there on the right side of the image, you can see a couple buildings, the Toy block, and the Toy block, which is under construction, and the Massachusetts block in which we're standing is also under construction. Don't worry, we're going to get to see some of those buildings in just a little bit. Taylor caught this unique image. This is the 1891 Corn Palace, also at the corner of 6th and Pierce, but it's under construction. The building is not yet completed. You can see near the top of the dome where you're still just looking at some wood framing, and it has not yet been covered with grain. Sioux City is really, again, promoting itself as the next major metropolis of the United States interior. Sioux City in 1890 is the 78th largest city in the United States. So we are still a major place, unlike the, whatever we are now, something like 328th largest city in the country. We are advertising ourselves, Sioux City is advertising itself as a place where Eastern surplus money can be invested in manufacturing plants, in real estate, in railroads. This is one example. The Boston Investment Company is a $2 million incorporation that was set up to build buildings and build manufacturing plants here. This is the Boston block at 1005 4th Street. This building is still standing. You're going to see in this talk some great examples of this Victorian-era architecture. This happens to be Richardsonian Romanesque, defined by that rough-cut ashlar stone and the Roman rounded arched windows. The Lexington block. You're getting all these Eastern names. You just had the Boston block. Here you get the Lexington block. This was located at 815 4th. This building is no longer standing. It was torn down in the 1980s. It's where the convention center is today. The Massachusetts block at the corner of 4th and Jackson. This building occupies the same space as today's Badgerow building. Again, we see this as a Richardsonian Romanesque style building. This building, the Plymouth block at 4th and Court Street, still standing. This is also a Boston Investment Company building. Guys like Gordon Badgerow, who were instrumental in transitioning 4th Street into Sioux City's Main Street instead of Pearl. He was very active in real estate along 4th Street. This is just one of his buildings, the Tacoma block at the northeast corner of 4th and Iowa Streets. It was called the Tacoma block because Gordon Badgerow also had investments in Tacoma, Washington. Interestingly, I don't have a picture of it here, but the Malvern block was also one of his investments. That's the town he was born in Canada. At the corner of 6th and Jackson, or 4th and Jackson, forgive me, 4th and Jackson is the Metropolitan block, designed by local architect Charles Porter Brown. If you look at the top floor of this building in the tower, you'll see a couple of men looking out the window. That's Charles Brown's office. I'm assuming one of them is him, and it would be the only photo we have of Charles Brown, if it is indeed. The major block on 4th Street was built in this boom era in 1889. This is at 1010 4th Street. This building is still standing. Something I wanted to point out in this, if you look at the top of the major block, you can see it says College of Commerce. And on the side of the building, you see painted University of the Northwest. The University of the Northwest is the predecessor of Morningside College. It was established in 1890, but didn't have any buildings out in Morningside yet. So the University of the Northwest had spaces rented in downtown in which it conducted its classes. Many of those classes were in this building. We'll see one of those a little bit later on. Arthur Samuel Garretson had been in Sioux City about 10 years by the time this photo was taken of his hotel building at the corner of 5th and Pierce Street. This is the Hotel Garretson. Again, this is just showing what was the boom era, what's going on just in downtown alone. This is the Gordon Hotel at the corner of 4th and Iowa. This was a real estate project of William Gordon. You might be familiar with William Gordon's name. There is a major street in Sioux City along the city's riverfront named for him. The cultural jewel of the time was the Peavey Grand Opera House. Taylor was inside taking photographs. This one taken from the seating looking toward the stage. This image taken from the stage looking off into the seating. I and my coworkers take great pride in solving mysteries, finding photos, finding information. Many of these photographs were unidentified. We identify more and more as time passes. This is one photo of the Peavey Grand Drug Company at 719 4th Street that I just identified last week. Now, there are a combination of things that go into that, and I'll spare you the details. But occasionally, especially if these have been identified recently, I'm going to let you know. Because again, we take great pride in it. It's great mystery solving. This is the interior of the United Bank building at 5th and Jackson Streets. How rare is it to see interiors from this era? Well, it's very rare. It's difficult to take photographs in dark building interiors, especially with the technology available to guys like Taylor. This is interior of the Commercial State Bank at 4th and Nebraska Streets. This bank was located in the Bolton-Commercial block. We're going to see the next photo is of also the interior of the Bolton-Commercial block. This is the atrium of that 4-story building. You can see we have balconies on all 4 floors looking down into the lobby. Just some fantastic detail in the balusters around these balconies and beautiful stairways. We have probably about 5 more images of the interior of this building. This is a recently identified image. There's, again, a longer story here, but I'll spare you with the details. William Hunt was a druggist, and this was his shop at 617 4th Street. What is great about this image, if you look toward the far right side, you'll see a mirrored cabinet in the back of this room. You can see Taylor's camera in that reflection, and possibly Taylor himself. I'll just zoom in right here. You can just see the camera right about there, and Taylor might be right here. It's really hard to tell. Hutchinson's Candy Palace at 615 4th Street. These business interiors are just, they're ostentatious. I mean, they're so elaborate. Oops, sorry about that. Did I skip another one? No, Hutchinson's Candy Palace. This is the interior of W.S. Stratton Company, Music Company at 515 Pierce. I was just doing a little research before this because I'll admit I gave this talk yesterday to a group. But I made the statement that this music was really the only entertainment in the home. You clearly don't have things like television, you don't have radio, you don't even have phonograph records. And that's what I was verifying, that phonographs were not even really popular yet by the 1890s. So here are your pianos and your organs at Stratton Music Company. This is interior of Wissing Jewelry at 616 5th Street. Another business exterior, this is the H.A. Lyon block at 416 Pearl Street. The first floor was the H.A. Lyon Sporting Goods shop, and Lyon had been a gunsmith in Sioux City since the 1860s, and upstairs in the building were hotel rooms. This is just a really neat image of a parade along, coming down Pearl Street. We're looking north from 4th Street. The large building you see on the left is McElhaney's Hall, and that is at 4th and Pearl. That is exactly where Taylor's studio was located, in that large 3-story building there in the center. You can also see the parade. We have the police department at the lead of the parade, and because we are celebrating municipal bands, the Knights of Pythias brass band is the next entry in that parade. Going to move just a little bit up Pearl Street. This is the grocery store of Charles Brune at 407 Pearl Street. You can see the elaborately displayed fruit and vegetables. Davidson Brothers, a far more familiar name to some of you. This is the Davidson Brothers dry goods store at 4th and Pierce Streets. It is Santa Claus headquarters. Now you might be able to see what's in that display window. It looks like a suspension bridge. It's made out of bars of soap. For every $1 you spent at Davidson's, they'd give you one guess to guess how many bars of soap were comprised, out of which that bridge was comprised. There were prizes available. And no, I don't know how many bars of soap. Why bars of soap? They're Haskins soap. Haskins was a local soap manufacturer. So a neat little local connection. Oops. C.G. Culver and Company, dry goods, 4th and Jackson Streets. They were located in the Massachusetts building. What's so great, there's so many fascinating things going on in these images, but take a look at the left. You have a column supporting the building, and on either side of that, you have those 2 glass domes. There are corsets inside those. There's also a neat cable system in the center of the image. There weren't cash registers, so when you paid for your goods, your money went in a little basket and it went up to a central teller's room, so you could pay for your goods that way. This just happens to be kind of the women's department. You see there are perfumes and makeups in the front of this image. Well, C.G. Culver would turn into a company you might recognize. It would turn into the Pelletier department store. Pelletier department store, again here in the Massachusetts block. We've already seen this building, but in this case I wanted to show it because the Pelletier company is of course where the Pelletier fire started in December 23rd of 1904, which burned everything you see in this photograph. It burned 2.5 blocks of downtown, which is why it's great to have a fire department. This is Taylor's photograph of hose house number 1 of the Sioux City Fire Department at 410 Water Street. Of course, this structure is still standing, but what we get to see really well in this photograph are the cedar block streets. They're quite prominent, and the wooden sidewalks. So we have wood boardwalks still throughout much of downtown. It's a good thing we have a fire department to fight fires like this one captured by Taylor. This is the Tolerton and Stetson wholesale grocery fire. This is at 2nd and Pearl Streets. This fire was in 1891. This is the cornerstone laying of the Independent Order of Oddfellows building on the north side of 4th Street between Jackson and Jones. A nice crowd of people. In the background of that image, you can see the old Central High School. The Sioux City High School building is pictured there in the background. The Union Depot, getting to transportation. This is the Union Depot at 3rd and Douglas Streets. This is the parking lot in front of the Stony Creek Inn. Here it is under construction, probably in 1892, because it opened in 1893, or it's very near completion. And just because we have it, there's a great photo of the backside of that building as well, with all the construction materials sitting around. The Union Depot was part of a terminal railroad system, meaning that Sioux City was fortunate to be the terminus or the end point of several different railroad lines and the convergence point. So rail cars would be brought here by one company, picked up by another. It's a big industry. Part of that was a warehouse infrastructure like the Union Terminal Warehouse, which you can see here. This is located at 2nd and Iowa Streets. If you weren't here for my fires talk long ago, you would know that this building, or you wouldn't know that this building burned in 1895. However, you might not remember that even if you were at that talk. I mean, it was a couple of years ago. Getting on with transportation. Most people, even in this era of fast growth, still lived within about 1.5 miles of downtown Sioux City. We're a relatively centralized place until the 1890s, when these little suburban areas on the west side, on the north side, and Morningside, they were all beginning to develop, and each of them had their innovative transportation methods. For the north side, it was the Sioux City Cable Railway Company. This is a cable car traveling north on Jackson Street, right around 8th Street. It was powered by this coal-fired power plant, the Sioux City Cable Railway Company, at 29th and 29th and Jones Streets. Of course, the line went up and down Jackson, went up Jackson all the way to Central Park. Now, the cable line was masterminded by two people whose names you're probably going to recognize, John Pierce and D.T. Hedges. Together, they would level hills and fill in valleys for 4 streets on Sioux City's north side. From 28th all the way up to about 40th Street, they leveled Nebraska Street, Jackson Street, Jones, and I missed one. Pierce, Nebraska, Jackson, and Jones. Sorry about that. And if you think those streets are hilly now, or Sioux City's hilly now, you should have seen it 125 years ago. This is a great image of some of that hill grading going on. And I'll be sure to point this out in a couple other images we're going to see in just a little bit. Speaking of developers like John Pierce, this is a badly damaged negative of the construction of John Pierce's home at 29th and Jackson Streets. There are more homes that Taylor is taking photos of in this neighborhood, including the James V. Mahoney House at 2810 Nebraska Street. This house is still standing. This is an excellent example of Queen Anne Victorian style architecture, which is what we're going to see a lot of upcoming. We're going to be, hate to break it to you or to break the surprise, we're going to see a lot of houses in the next 10 minutes or so. Towers, porches with elaborate woodwork. We see varied textures from wood clapboards, wood shakes. We see steeply pitched roofs with irregular shapes. So this house, James Mahoney's, is still standing. This is the T.S. Martin House at 2801 Nebraska Street. And I just had to point this out. You see almost the entire T.S. Martin family. You have T.S. in the carriage, one of his sons, either Jules or J. Earl. On the other side of the porch, you have either Jules or J. Earl. Then you have his wife, Agnes, who is pregnant with their third son, Howard, and then T.S. Martin's mother-in-law, Garusha Murphy. So you get a little bit of everything in this photo. That house is no longer standing today. This is the Elijah Foster House at 32nd and Jackson Street. This building is still standing. This is the Robert Baker House, just a little bit farther north on Jackson Street. This house also is still standing. Oops. This is the Chris and Mary Moller house at 2933 Jackson Street. This house is also still standing. It doesn't look much like this, however. Mary, it should be noted, is Mary Helen, the daughter of one of John Pierce's daughters. This is the Will H. Beck house at 27th and Jackson. Now again, this is kind of a damaged image, but you can see this house is just nearing completion. This house burned in 1970. This is the interior of the S.H. Hess House at 603 28th. That's the northeast corner of 28th and Nebraska. This is one of those great identifications that I really need to tell you about. If you look, it's just a Victorian parlor, but if you look through the front window, you can see a small stone column of the house across the street. And I just happened to recognize it. I'm a North Sider, so I recognized it and thought, well, by golly, it's funny how these things work out. It's a great little story. Sometimes you have to get out the magnifying glass and look really closely through windows and in mirrors and see reflections and look whose portraits are hanging on the wall. Hopefully you recognize someone. This is the William Gordon house at 2719 Jackson Street. This house is gone, but what I really want to point out in this, take a look what we're standing on. We are above electric power lines. So we're standing on top of a hill that today is not a hill. In the background, you see hills. You can see men and horses working on them. That is no longer a hill. In fact, where they're cutting away that mound is where St. Luke's is today, or Unity Point. That just goes to show how many hills were cut down and how deep some of the valleys were and that were filled in. This is an interior. This is William Gordon's dining room. The other big name in the development of Pierce's addition was, of course, D.T. Hedges. This is his home at 2803 Jackson Street. Not often that you get to see a 4-story tower on a wood frame building. It's a pretty spectacular structure. This house was torn down in 1938. But we have great interior shots. This is D.T. Hedges' entryway and stairwell. It's carpeted. You know, today we think of hardwood floors as being a luxury. Back then, carpet was a luxury. And wallpaper? Oh, did the Victorians love their wallpaper. Now, there are only two in this one. You have wallpaper on the wall and wallpaper on the ceiling. Wait until we get to D.T. Hedges' parlor. Carpet on the floor, 3 different kinds of wallpaper, and ceiling paper. Take a look on the right side of that image, his bookshelf, his cabinet, a stuffed owl. Keep in mind, we're seeing these in black and white. I can only imagine the colors that were present in Hedges' living room. And there's his dining room, again, complete with carpet and 4 kinds of wallpaper. There are schools. In that neighborhood is Bryant Elementary. This is an 1891 or 1892 photograph of the original Bryant School. Kind of staying on the Leeds side of town, this is the Sioux City Engine and Iron Works in the eastern part of Leeds. This photograph was taken from the Bonus Milner grain mill, looking toward to the west, and you can see a newly developing Leeds in the background of this shot. Staying in Leeds for just a little bit, the Tredway house, which many of you might remember as Elmwood. It was modified in the early 20th century, but this is the Tredway house in southern Leeds. And not to be left out, there is a photograph, an 1891 or 1892 photograph of Hawthorne School at 44th and Central Streets in Leeds. I'm moving back into the city center just a little bit, kind of in that area today we call Rose Hill. This is the D.A. McGee house at 309 13th. This house is still standing, just not in this location. This house was moved to Plum Creek Road in 1994. This is the William C. Hutchins house at 1105 Douglas Street. Note the dog in the front yard, the wood, the boardwalk sidewalk, and the wood pavers going down the alley. This house is still standing. This is the Richard C.A. Flourney house at 1427 Douglas. This house is still standing. This is the William McKercher home at 2171 Douglas Street. All three of the houses you see here are still standing. I should note that its address today is not 2171. Addresses were bizarre, and I'll get to that a little bit when we talk about Morningside. Between 21st and 24th, they didn't transition to like the 2200 block and the 2300 block. They just kept 2100 and going up to like 2199. And then you got to 24th, and then suddenly it was 2400 block. This is the Edwin Donaldson house at 1415 Grandview. This house is still standing. The Charles DeMun house, also on Grandview. This house is gone. This Harcourt W.G. Vernon house, that's a mouthful, at 1423 Grandview. This house is still standing. Oops. The Charles Brune house. We saw his grocery store earlier. This house burned in the 1970s. And in the background, you can see the Thomas Park Gear House, which is also gone. The Frank L. Clark House at 1403 Summit. This house is still standing. Just a neat example of this kind of densely populated downtown area. You get an early triplex. You get 1612 through 1618 Pierce. Again, note the cedar streets and the wood sidewalks. This is the Albert C. Kellogg house at 1514 Nebraska Street. This one I have to give congratulations to my coworker, Matt. He figured this one out about 2 weeks ago. Right across the street is the William Hunt house at 1519 Nebraska Street. Armstrong School was one of two buildings used as a high school during this era. So here is a class at Armstrong School, or Sioux City High School, probably around 1891 or 1892. That Armstrong School was located at the southeast corner of 8th and Pierce Streets. Other schools in that neighborhood, including the Pearl Street School, which was later renamed Bancroft, at 11th and Pearl. This building burned in 1932, but was replaced. Irving Elementary School at 11th and Jennings, built in 1886, was photographed by Taylor. It is still standing as well. All right, so we've covered kind of the near north side and the north side. Now we get to transport out to Morningside via the elevated railroad. Here, Taylor gives us a photo of the elevated railroad, which started at 3rd and Jones Streets in downtown and went to central Morningside. This is very complicated. I mentioned the whole thing about addresses. The reason I know some of the house who built some of these houses, because I can find their address, and I then therefore identify who was the first occupant. In Morningside, that's different because there aren't addresses simply in the directory. In the directory, you're simply located at a stop along the elevated railroad, like St. Mary's Station, or St. Albans Station, or Nicollet Station. So we really don't know. This house today, this house is still standing today, is located at 3212 4th Avenue Place, which, to make things confusing, there was also a Morningside Avenue. That street at the time used to be called Morningside Boulevard. This is the Edwin C. Peters house. Today, this would be on the campus of Morningside College, where Jones Science Hall is today. This house burned in 1914. Edwin C. Peters was, of course, a promoter of Morningside and Morningside College, as well as the Sioux City Parks system. He was one of the founding members of the Sioux City Parks Commission in 1906. Again, a house we don't know who built it, but this home is located at 3615 Transit Avenue. It is still standing. Take a look on the right side of this image in the background. and you can see the old Grace Methodist Church. This is the Andrew S. Wilson House at 2011 South St. Aubin Street. This home is no longer standing. This is 2030 South St. Aubin, though we don't know who lived here. This house is also still standing. We have some other photographs of this in the early 20th century. The tower on the corner of this one is gone today, so it doesn't look quite like this. This is the Adam V. Larimer House at 2105 South St. Aubin Street. This house is gone. However, the neighboring house there on the left is still standing. Arthur Samuel Garretson, big promoter of Sioux City and Morningside, built his home there in 1888. This is the A.S. Garretson House at 4005 Morningside Avenue. Some of you are likely to remember this as the Morningside Branch Library. It was that until 1967. It became that library in 1932. From 1907 to 1932, it had been used by Morningside College for various uses. On the left side of this image, you can see A.S. Garretson's barn, because he did have quite an acreage there in that area. So we take a look. Here are some of his cattle, and his barn reappears there in the background. This is in central Morningside in about 1890. Moving back a little closer to town is the Greenville or the Cooper School at Fairmont Street and Leach Avenue. Also in Morningside, Longfellow School. This is the original Longfellow School at Garretson Avenue and Sioux Trail. This building opened in 1890 and burned in 1893. Some students there at Longfellow School. Bryant and Longfellow, same design, but you can kind of tell there are just little bitty differences in arches and things like that to identify which school is which. I won't get into, again, a long story about identification of photographs, but this one is my ultimate favorite photograph identification, so I just won't get into it. This is Alan Crossan's home on what was called then the South Morningside Farm. This is on Christie Road. This house was gone by the 1950s, and just west of the mall, west of the Southern Hills Mall, you might be familiar with the Prestwick Apartments. The apartments just west of the mall. This house is located there. This is way outside of Sioux City, really, at that time. Moving over to the west side, here's Taylor's photo of Webster School at West 5th and Market Streets. Hopkins School at West 8th and Panoa Streets. Everett School at the corner of West 3rd and Rebecca. Of course, this building was identical to the Greenville or Cooper School. W.W. Byam's house at 1747 California Avenue. If you've never heard of California Avenue, you're not alone. It's a little gravel road off of West 19th. The Byam house itself is gone, but the carriage house is still standing and is used as a house today. Up from this little gravel road, there's just a set of concrete steps that go up to nothing except a kind of a big front yard in front of that little carriage house. It's really fascinating. Here's Taylor's view of Riverside, of the northern part of Riverside Park. Just along the Big Sioux River, you can see Sioux City's first roller coaster. Moving down into Riverside Park, just a little bit of comedy. This is the orphan's home in Riverside. So again, this is more of what photographers of the era would be taking pictures of. They're kind of portraits of people, funny situations, or their little excursions to Riverside Park. Staying on the west side, this is the James F. Peavey house at 2805 Rebecca Street. This house is still standing. Here is an interior of Peavey's home. We saw that advertisement for Taylor way at the beginning, taking pictures of trotting horses. Evans Driving Park on the west side, north of what is today Alfredo Pizza. There was a large quarter-mile track, a stadium for baseball, but of course the big sport of the day was horse racing, and you can see this racer in his sulky behind his horse. Moving back into downtown, changing gears just a little bit, Taylor captured some really neat images of churches at the time. This is the First Baptist Church at 5th and Nebraska Streets. That's where Subway is located today. This is First Congregational Church at 8th and Nebraska Streets. It's still under construction in this photograph. This building burned in 1916. St. Thomas Episcopal Church at 12th and Douglas, a great Richardsonian Romanesque style building, but better yet, we have photographs of its construction. Here's some of the work crew. You can probably see there the man standing on the far right at the top. That is probably John M. Porbaugh, the contractor for this structure, made out of what we know here in town as Sioux quartzite. Porbaugh owned or part-owned 5 quarries in Minnesota and South Dakota that quarried that material and brought it here. He was a major contractor here in Sioux City. So buildings of this style with this stone, there's a good chance it was a Porbaugh structure. Here's an interior of St. Thomas Episcopal Church from 1890. It looks very much the same today. The old First Methodist Church at the corner of 7th and Nebraska Streets. For those of you familiar with Reverend Haddock, this is the church where he was preaching in that era. And just hopping around because I didn't talk much about the east side, this is Cole's Addition or Franklin School, located at 9th and Plymouth Streets, along Old Highway 75. And moving down into the South Bottoms, this is the 5th Ward or Wooster School at the corner of Dace Avenue and Wall Street. I alluded to it a long time ago, classes from the University of the Northwest in one of those rented buildings in downtown. And finally, kind of how I'm going to wrap up this talk, this is a drawing of the proposed 1893 Corn Palace. You might be familiar that Sioux City had corn palaces up to 1891. We skipped 1892 as a reaction to the May flood of 1892. 1893, a grand palace is planned. The big trouble, in April of 1893, a European and then U.S. panic, U.S. financial panics started in April of 1893. I had talked about Sioux City in that same year, 1893, with 62,000 residents. 7 years later, half of the town is gone. The U.S. Census in 1900 put Sioux City's population at 33,000. Everybody left. Railroads failed. Banks failed. People left, including Charles N. Taylor. He left during the Panic of 1893. This is the Sioux City Directory from 1894-95. And we can see right here, Taylor, Charles N., moved to Burlington, Vermont. And that is a little bit about Charles Taylor and his photography. Sioux City in the 1890s and Sioux City in its boom era. So thank you all very much for coming. I don't even know what time it is. I don't know how I did. Oh, great. We have plenty of time for questions. Yes.